Jake Morrison floated near the window of the small research ship, watching the stars drift past in the endless black of space. He had been out here for 3 months now, collecting data about cosmic radiation patterns near the edge of human territory. The work was quiet and peaceful, exactly what he needed after 15 years of military service. His 2 companions, Lisa Carter and Ben Rodriguez, worked at their stations behind him, the soft hum of computers filling the small cabin. Lisa was checking their navigation systems when the first warning came. A bright flash appeared on her screen, followed by readings that made no sense. Something massive was moving toward them, something bigger than any human ship ever built. She called out to Jake, her voice tight with concern. Ben looked up from his scientific equipment, his face pale as he saw the readings on Lisa's display. Jake moved quickly to the main console and studied the data. Whatever was coming their way was enormous, at least 10 times the size of their small vessel. The object was moving with purpose, not drifting like space debris. It was a ship, but unlike anything humans had ever created. The design was smooth and organic, like it had been grown rather than built. Strange energy patterns flowed across, its surface in waves of blue and purple light. The alien ship slowed as it approached, positioning itself directly in front of the human vessel. Jake tried to establish communication, sending standard greeting messages on all frequencies. For several minutes, there was only silence. Then the response came, not as radio signals, but as direct transmission into their computer systems. The message was clear and simple, translated somehow into perfect English. The aliens called themselves the Zephyrian Empire. They claimed dominion over this region of space and demanded that the humans prepare to be boarded for inspection. The tone was casual, almost bored, as if this was routine business for them. Jake felt a chill run down his spine as he realized they were dealing with a species that had done this many times before. War Master Kexthor stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the small human vessel with mild interest. The ship was primitive by Zephyrian standards, held together with metal alloys and basic fusion drives. The 3 life forms aboard showed typical patterns for a newly discovered species, elevated stress levels, and confusion at first contact. He had encountered dozens of such races during his long career, and they all followed predictable patterns. The Zephyrians had built their empire by being stronger, smarter, and more advanced than everyone they met. Their technology was thousands of years ahead of most species they encountered. Their weapons could destroy planets. Their shields could stop any attack, and their intelligence networks could predict the behavior of entire civilizations. They had never met a species that posed any real challenge to their supremacy. Kexthor ordered his boarding party to prepare. The humans would be taken aboard for study and questioning, standard procedure for first contact with a primitive race. The data they gathered would help determine how best to integrate this new species into the empire. Some races were useful as workers, others as soldiers, and a few became valuable trading partners. The Zephyrians always found a use for the species they conquered. Jake watched through the window as smaller ships detached from the alien vessel and moved toward them. The craft were sleek and fast, easily outmaneuvering anything humans could build. He knew resistance would be pointless with their current resources, but his military training kept his mind active, noting details about the alien technology and tactics. Every piece of information might be important later. Ben was frantically trying to send a message back to human space, but the aliens had somehow blocked their communications. Their computer systems were being systematically infiltrated and controlled by technology they could not understand. Lisa worked desperately to maintain control of their ship's basic functions, but it was like fighting the ocean with a cup. The alien boarding craft attached to their hull with a soft thud, followed by the sound of cutting tools. Jake gathered his crew together and gave them quick instructions. They would cooperate for now, observe everything, and look for opportunities. He had learned during his military service that the best time to act was when your enemy became overconfident. airlock door dissolved away, revealing three tall figures in environmental suits. The Zephyrians were humanoid, but clearly alien, with elongated limbs and faces hidden behind reflective masks. They moved with casual confidence, their weapons visible but not raised. To them, the humans were no more dangerous than children. Kexthor received the report from his boarding team with satisfaction. The humans had surrendered without resistance, exactly as expected. They would be brought aboard the flagship for processing and study. The War Master was already thinking about his next assignment, another star system that required investigation. This encounter with humanity would be nothing more than a footnote in his mission reports. The three humans were escorted through the alien ship's corridors, passing by technology that seemed like magic compared to their own equipment. Jake memorized every detail he could, from the layout of the passages to the behavior of the alien crew. The Zephyrians treated them with polite indifference, like specimens in a laboratory. As they were led to their holding area, Jake caught Lisa's eye and saw that she was doing the same thing he was, watching and learning. Ben was studying their captors intently, his scientific mind already working on the puzzle of alien biology and psychology. The Zephyrians had made their first mistake by assuming the humans were just another primitive species to be easily controlled. None of the aliens suspected that they had just captured a former Special Operations Commander, a brilliant pilot, and a scientist whose mind worked in ways they could not imagine. The War Master Kexthor believed he had encountered another routine, contact with an inferior species. He had no idea that he had just met the humans who would bring down his entire empire. The holding cell was larger than Jake had expected, with walls that seemed to glow with their own soft light. The Zephyrians had placed all three humans together, another sign of their casual attitude toward their prisoners. Ben sat in one corner, quietly observing their surroundings, while Lisa examined the door mechanism with professional interest. Jake paced slowly, his mind working through everything they had seen during their capture. The alien ship was massive beyond anything humans had imagined possible. During their walk through the corridors, Jake had counted at least 15 levels, each one stretching far beyond his line of sight. The crew moved with efficient purpose, their actions coordinated by technology that seemed to anticipate their needs. Every surface displayed information in flowing alien symbols, creating a constant stream of data about the ship's operations. War Master Kexthor visited them on their second day of captivity, accompanied by what appeared to be a scientific advisor. The alien commander was tall and imposing, his skin a pale blue color with darker markings that might have indicated rank or age. He spoke to them through a translation device, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. The War Master explained their situation with casual indifference. The humans were now property of the Zephyrian Empire, specimens to be studied and eventually displayed as examples of a newly discovered species. Their home system would be visited by a proper invasion fleet within the next few months, and humanity would be given the opportunity to surrender peacefully. Resistance would be met with overwhelming force, as it always was. Jake listened carefully to every word, noting the aliens' assumptions about human behavior and capabilities. Kexthor spoke, as if the outcome was already decided, describing the conquest of humanity like a routine administrative task. The War Master had clearly done this many times before, and he expected this encounter to follow the same predictable pattern as all the others. Ben asked questions about Zephyrian science and technology, playing the role of a curious researcher. The alien seemed amused by his interest, treating him like a primitive trying to understand advanced concepts beyond his comprehension. They answered some of his questions with condescending patience, revealing details about their civilization that they considered harmless to share. The Zephyrian Empire controlled 12 star systems, each one conquered through superior military technology and strategic planning. They had been expanding for over 2,000 years, absorbing dozens of species into their domain. Some became willing subjects, others required more forceful persuasion, but all eventually accepted Zephyrian rule as inevitable. Lisa focused, her attention on the ship's technical systems, asking innocent questions about life support and artificial gravity. The aliens seemed pleased by her technical curiosity, explaining basic concepts as if teaching a child. They had no idea that she was actually mapping their ship's critical infrastructure, identifying potential vulnerabilities that human ingenuity might exploit. During their conversations with their captors, the humans learned about Zephyrian psychology and culture. The aliens valued efficiency and order above all else, following strict hierarchical structures that had remained unchanged for centuries. Individual initiative was discouraged in favor of collective action directed by superior authority. They had never encountered a species that valued chaos and unpredictability as strategic advantages. Jake noticed that the Zephyrian crew operated according to rigid schedules and protocols. Guards changed at precise intervals, meals were served at exact times, and every activity followed predetermined patterns. The aliens seemed incapable of deviating from their established procedures, viewing any change as a sign of inefficiency or failure. The ship's artificial intelligence systems were incredibly advanced, monitoring every aspect of the vessel's operation with perfect precision. Environmental controls, navigation, weapons systems, and even crew schedules were managed by interconnected computer networks that responded to voice commands and gestural interfaces. The Zephyrians trusted their technology completely, never questioning its reliability or considering the possibility of system failure. Ben discovered that the aliens had enhanced lifespans, living for several centuries by human standards. This longevity had made them cautious and risk-averse, preferring proven methods over experimentation. They planned their actions decades in advance, following strategies that had worked successfully for generations. The concept of adapting quickly to unexpected circumstances was foreign to their way of thinking. On their fourth day of captivity, Jake was brought before the War Master for individual questioning. Kexthor wanted to understand human military capabilities and defensive preparations. Jake answered honestly about humanity's technology and military organization, knowing that the aliens would discover this information anyway during their planned invasion. His truthfulness seemed to confirm the War Master's assumptions about human primitiveness and naivety. The alien commander was particularly interested in human command structures and decision-making processes. Jake described the chaos of democratic governments and independent military branches, information that seemed to reinforce Zephyrian beliefs about human inferiority. Kexthor could not imagine how such a disorganized species could mount any effective resistance against superior Zephyrian coordination. During these sessions, Jake learned about Zephyrian military doctrine and strategic planning. The aliens relied heavily on overwhelming technological superiority, expecting their enemies to surrender when faced with impossible odds. They had never developed tactics for fighting against unconventional warfare or guerrilla strategies, viewing such methods as primitive and ineffective. Lisa spent her time studying the door controls and environmental systems, pretending to be fascinated by alien engineering. The guards enjoyed explaining their superior technology to the primitive human, not realizing that she was actually learning how to manipulate their ship's critical systems. Her questions seemed innocent and academic, exactly what the aliens expected from a curious but harmless prisoner. Ben continued his conversations with the scientific staff, discussing Zephyrian biology and social organization. The aliens were proud of their achievements and eager to share their knowledge with what they considered an inferior species. They revealed weaknesses in their physical adaptation and psychological conditioning that they did not recognize as vulnerabilities. The three humans met each evening to share information, speaking in casual conversation that their guards dismissed as meaningless chatter. Jake coordinated their observations, building a comprehensive picture of Zephyrian capabilities and limitations. The aliens' greatest weakness was becoming clear: They had never faced an enemy that refused to follow the rules of conventional warfare. War Master Kexthor began preparing his reports for the High Command, describing humanity as a typical primitive species suitable for standard conquest procedures. He recommended a moderate invasion force, confident that humans would surrender quickly when confronted with Zephyrian technology. The War Master had no idea that his prisoners were already planning the downfall of his empire. Jake knew that their time was running out. Soon, the Zephyrian ship would return to Empire space, carrying intelligence that would doom humanity to conquest or destruction. But the aliens had made a critical error by underestimating their prisoners and revealing, too, much about their own capabilities. The humans had learned everything they needed to know about their enemy's strengths and weaknesses. The stage was set for humanity's greatest test, and Jake Morrison was already planning their first move in what would become a war unlike anything the Zephyrian Empire had ever faced. Jake spent his 6th day of captivity watching the Zephyrian crew through the transparent wall of their holding cell. The aliens moved through their duties with mechanical precision, every action following protocols that had been established centuries ago. He counted the guards, noted their shift changes, and observed their casual attitude toward the human prisoners. The Zephyrians clearly believed that escape was impossible, a confidence that Jake intended to exploit. Ben had made a breakthrough in understanding Zephyrian biology during his conversations with the ship's medical officer. The aliens had evolved on a world with lower gravity and thinner atmosphere than Earth, giving them enhanced physical capabilities, but also creating unexpected vulnerabilities. Their enhanced lifespans came at the cost of slower healing and reduced adaptability to environmental changes. Most importantly, their nervous systems operated differently from humans, making them susceptible to certain types of psychological pressure. The medical officer had been particularly talkative, proud of his species' biological superiority over the primitive humans. He explained how Zephyrian genetic engineering had eliminated most diseases and physical weaknesses, creating a population of nearly identical individuals optimized for their roles in society. This genetic uniformity was considered their greatest achievement, but Ben recognized it as a critical weakness that could be exploited. Lisa had discovered the ship's central computer core during a guided tour meant to demonstrate Zephyrian technological superiority. The AI systems that controlled every aspect of the vessel were incredibly advanced, but also rigidly programmed, incapable of adapting to situations outside their original parameters. The aliens trusted their computers completely, never questioning their decisions or preparing backup systems for manual operation. During her technical discussions with the engineering staff, Lisa learned that the Zephyrian ship relied on automated systems for everything from navigation to life support. The crew members were essentially supervisors rather than operators, monitoring displays and following computer recommendations without understanding the underlying processes. This dependency on technology was seen as efficiency, but Lisa recognized it as a dangerous vulnerability. Jake had been studying Zephyrian military doctrine through his conversations with War Master Kexthor and the security officers. The aliens approached warfare like a mathematical equation, calculating the exact amount of force needed to overcome any resistance. Their strategies were based on overwhelming technological superiority and the assumption that all species would eventually submit to superior power. They had never encountered an enemy that fought with creativity and desperation rather than logic and calculation. The War Master enjoyed explaining previous conquests to Jake, viewing it as education for a primitive mind. Each campaign had followed the same pattern: initial contact, demonstration of superior force, demand for surrender, and rapid subjugation of any resistance. The Zephyrians had never faced guerrilla warfare, terrorist tactics, or psychological operations because their previous enemies had all been civilized species that fought according to established rules. Ben discovered that Zephyrian society was structured around absolute hierarchy and collective decision-making. Individual initiative was discouraged, and all major choices were made by committees of elders who consulted vast databases of historical precedent. The aliens could not imagine a species that valued independent thinking and rapid adaptation over careful planning and consensus building. The ship's cultural advisor was fascinated by human social organization, particularly their chaotic democratic governments and competitive economic systems. She viewed human society as primitive and inefficient, unable to achieve the perfect coordination that had made Zephyrian civilization so successful. The advisor could not understand how such a disorganized species could create advanced technology or maintain complex social structures. Lisa learned about the ship's defensive systems during conversations with the security chief, who was proud of the vessel's impenetrable shields and automated weapon networks. The Zephyrians had never lost a ship to enemy action, relying on technology that could respond to threats faster than any biological reaction time. The security chief explained their systems with confident pride, not realizing that he was revealing crucial information about their limitations. Jake discovered that the Zephyrian command structure was highly centralized, with all major decisions flowing up through layers of bureaucracy to the high command. Local commanders like War Master Kexthor had limited authority to adapt their tactics or deviate from established procedures. This system ensured coordination across their vast empire, but also created inflexibility that could be exploited by a more adaptable enemy. During his daily interrogations, Jake learned about the planned invasion of human space. The Zephyrians intended to send a large but conventional fleet, expecting quick victory through superior firepower and technology. They planned to target major population centers and military installations, following the same strategy that had worked against dozens of other species. The aliens had no concept of asymmetric warfare or the human capacity for unconventional resistance. Ben's medical conversations revealed that Zephyrian psychology was fundamentally different from human thinking. The aliens valued order and predictability, above all else, viewing chaos and uncertainty as evidence of failure or incompetence. They could not imagine a species that thrived on change and adapted quickly to new situations. This psychological difference would be crucial in any future conflict. Lisa discovered that the ship's computer systems were incredibly sophisticated, but also vulnerable to certain types of interference. The AI networks were designed to handle known threats and established protocols, but they struggled with unexpected inputs or situations outside their programming parameters. A sufficiently creative attack could potentially overwhelm their decision-making processes and create system failures. The three humans had developed a communication system using subtle gestures and coded conversations that their guards dismissed as meaningless human behavior. Jake coordinated their intelligence gathering, ensuring that they covered all aspects of Zephyrian capabilities and weaknesses. The aliens' casual attitude toward their prisoners was providing them with information that would be crucial for humanity's survival. War Master Kexthor was pleased with the progress of his interrogations, believing that he had learned everything necessary about human capabilities and limitations. He began preparing his final reports for the High Command, recommending a moderate invasion force and standard conquest procedures. The War Master was confident that humanity would surrender quickly when faced with Zephyrian superiority, just as every other species had done. Jake knew that their time was running out, but he also knew that they had gathered enough information to give humanity a fighting chance. The Zephyrians had revealed their greatest weakness through their own arrogance. They could not imagine an enemy that refused to fight by their rules. The aliens expected logical resistance that could be calculated and overcome, not the chaotic creativity that defined human warfare. The pieces were falling into place for Jake's escape plan. But more importantly, the humans had discovered how to defeat an enemy that considered itself invincible. The Zephyrian Empire was about to learn that their greatest strength, their predictable efficiency, was also their most dangerous vulnerability when facing a species that specialized in turning order into chaos. Ben's analysis of Zephyrian biology had revealed specific weaknesses that could be exploited, Lisa's technical knowledge had identified critical system vulnerabilities, and Jake's military experience had shown him exactly how to use this information against their captors. The aliens thought they were studying primitive specimens, but they were actually educating the architects of their own destruction. Jake waited until the 3rd hour of the night shift, when the Zephyrian crew was at its smallest and most routine. He had spent 8 days studying their patterns, counting guards, and timing their movements with military precision. The aliens followed their schedules so exactly that he could predict their locations within minutes. Their predictability would be their downfall. Lisa had been working on the door controls for days, pretending to examine them out of curiosity, while actually learning their operating principles. The Zephyrian technology was advanced but logical, following patterns that her engineering mind could understand and manipulate. She had discovered that the security systems responded to specific harmonic frequencies that could be generated using components from their personal equipment. Ben had prepared a distraction using his knowledge of Zephyrian biology and psychology. During their conversations, he had learned that the aliens were sensitive to certain sound frequencies and visual patterns that humans found barely noticeable. He had also identified chemicals in their clothing and personal items that could create specific reactions in Zephyrian physiology when combined properly. The escape began when Ben created a small fire using friction and synthetic materials from their uniforms. The smoke triggered the ship's automatic safety systems, but more importantly, it contained chemical compounds that would cause disorientation and mild panic in any Zephyrian who breathed it. The aliens' enhanced senses, which they considered an advantage, made them more vulnerable to sensory overload than they realized. Lisa activated her improvised frequency generator just as the guards entered to investigate the disturbance. The harmonic resonance interfered with their door controls and communication devices, creating exactly the type of unexpected system failure that Zephyrian technology was not designed to handle. The guards found themselves trapped in the cell with their prisoners while alarms sounded throughout the ship. Jake moved with the speed and precision of his military training, using techniques the aliens had never encountered. The Zephyrians were physically stronger than humans, but they fought with predictable methods based on their technological advantages. Jake used improvised weapons and unconventional tactics that confused and overwhelmed guards who expected logical, straightforward resistance. The 3 humans worked together with a coordination that the Zephyrians could not understand. While the aliens relied on computer systems and established protocols to coordinate their actions, the humans adapted instantly to changing circumstances. Ben continued creating diversions with his chemical knowledge. Lisa manipulated ship systems faster than the AI could compensate, and Jake cleared their path using methods that seemed impossible to their captors. They moved through the ship's corridors like ghosts, using ventilation shafts and maintenance passages that the Zephyrians had never considered security risks. The aliens' rigid thinking prevented them from imagining that prisoners would crawl through spaces barely large, enough for human bodies or risk exposure to dangerous ship systems. The humans' willingness to take calculated risks gave them access to areas the aliens thought were impossible to reach. Lisa accessed the ship's central computer core, while Jake and Ben defended their position against increasingly frantic security teams. The Zephyrian AI systems were incredibly powerful, but also vulnerable to the type of creative sabotage that human minds excelled at creating. Lisa planted false data and corrupted files while downloading crucial information about Zephyrian technology and military capabilities. The sabotage Jake implemented was subtle and delayed, designed to cause maximum damage long after their escape. He corrupted navigation databases, altered weapon targeting systems, and planted false intelligence that would mislead the Zephyrian High Command about human capabilities. The aliens would not discover most of this damage until it was far too late to prevent its consequences. Ben used his knowledge of ship systems to create diversions that drew security forces away from their escape route. He triggered false alarms, activated emergency procedures, and created system failures that appeared random but were actually carefully calculated to cause maximum confusion. The Zephyrian crew found themselves responding to crises faster than their rigid protocols could handle. War Master Kexthor was awakened by alarms and reports of impossible events throughout his ship. The primitive humans had somehow escaped from a cell that his technology assured him was impenetrable. They were moving through his vessel using methods that his security systems could not track or predict. The War Master realized that he had seriously underestimated his prisoners, but it was already too late to contain them. The humans reached the shuttle bay through a combination of technical skill, physical courage, and tactical thinking that left their pursuers completely baffled. They had moved through the ship like it was designed for their escape, exploiting weaknesses that the Zephyrians had never known existed. The aliens' confidence in their technology was being systematically destroyed by 3 supposedly primitive specimens. Lisa activated a small Zephyrian shuttle using the access codes she had memorized during their technical discussions. The aliens had been so proud of their security systems that they had explained their basic operation principles, never imagining that a primitive human could understand and exploit their technology. The shuttle's AI systems accepted her commands because she used the proper authorization sequences. Jake planted his final sabotage in the shuttle bay, ensuring that the Zephyrians would be unable to pursue them immediately or track their escape route. He used his knowledge of their rigid thinking patterns to create delays and confusion that would give the humans precious time to reach safety. The aliens would spend hours following procedures and protocols while their prisoners escaped into space. Ben activated his most sophisticated distraction as they prepared to launch, creating a cascade of false emergencies that would occupy the ship's crew for hours. The Zephyrians found themselves dealing with multiple system failures and security breaches simultaneously, exactly the type of chaotic situation that their ordered society was least equipped to handle effectively. The shuttle launched while Zephyrian security forces were still trying to understand what had happened to their impenetrable ship. The humans had escaped using methods that the aliens could not comprehend, demonstrating capabilities that their intelligence had insisted were impossible for such a primitive species. War Master Kexthor watched their departure with growing dread about what this meant for his empire. As they flew away from the massive alien vessel, Jake reflected on what they had accomplished. They had not only escaped from supposedly impossible captivity, but they had also gathered intelligence that would give humanity crucial advantages in the coming war. More importantly, they had demonstrated that human creativity and adaptability could overcome Zephyrian technology and rigid thinking. Lisa piloted their stolen shuttle toward human space, following navigation routes that she had memorized from the ship's computer systems. The Zephyrians would eventually discover the full extent of the damage the humans had caused, but by then it would be too late to prevent the consequences. The aliens had learned their first hard lesson about underestimating humanity. Ben monitored their escape route while analyzing the biological samples and cultural information he had gathered during their captivity. The data they were bringing back to human space would be invaluable for preparing Earth's defenses against the coming invasion. The Zephyrians had unknowingly provided their enemies with everything needed to plan their defeat. The 3 humans had transformed from helpless prisoners into harbingers of their captor's doom, proving that the Zephyrian Empire's greatest weakness was their inability to understand or predict human behavior. War Master Kexthor's casual decision to capture and study them had set in motion the events that would ultimately destroy his civilization's invincibility. War Master Kexthor stood before the High Command Council, his pride wounded and his confidence shaken by the impossible escape of 3 primitive humans. The massive chamber was filled with the most powerful leaders of the Zephyrian Empire, their ancient faces showing the patient expressions of beings who had conquered dozens of worlds through careful planning and overwhelming force. They expected a routine report about another successful first contact, but Kexthor's news would challenge everything they believed about their own superiority. The War Master began his presentation with the standard protocols, describing the initial contact with humanity and the capture of the research vessel. He explained the humans' primitive technology and apparent lack of advanced military capabilities, information that seemed to confirm the Council's expectations about this new species. The elderly counselors nodded approvingly, already thinking ahead to the administrative details of adding another conquered race to their empire. But Kexthor could not bring himself to fully describe the humiliation of the humans' escape. His pride and the rigid expectations of Zephyrian culture prevented him from admitting that 3 supposedly primitive beings had outsmarted his entire crew and stolen one of their shuttles. Instead, he reported that the humans had escaped due to unforeseen technical malfunctions, implying that their success was due to luck rather than capability. The false intelligence that Jake Morrison had planted in the ship's databases supported this misleading narrative perfectly. The corrupted files suggested that humanity possessed modest technological capabilities and conventional military thinking, making them appear to be a minor threat that could be easily conquered with standard invasion procedures. The Council reviewed this fabricated data with satisfaction, seeing exactly what they expected to see. High Counselor Vexmar, the eldest member of the ruling body, praised Kexthor for his thorough intelligence gathering. The fabricated human technology, assessments indicated that Earth's defenses could be overcome by a moderate invasion force using established Zephyrian tactics. The Council saw no need to deviate from the successful strategies that had brought them victory over so many other worlds throughout their long history. The War Master's wounded pride led him to recommend a larger invasion force than the false intelligence actually justified, hoping to ensure quick victory and restore his reputation. But even his inflated estimates fell far short of what would actually be needed to conquer a species that specialized in unconventional warfare and creative problem-solving. The Zephyrians simply could not imagine an enemy that refused to fight. According to their rules, Strategic Counselor Mexthor reviewed the intelligence reports and recommended deploying 200 vessels for the human conquest, a force that had proven sufficient for conquering much larger and more advanced civilizations. The Council approved this allocation without debate, confident that their superior technology and tactical experience would guarantee victory against any resistance the primitives might attempt. The Zephyrian military began preparations for the invasion with their characteristic efficiency and attention to detail. Supply lines were established, troop deployments were calculated, and administrative procedures were initiated for the eventual integration of human territories into the Empire. Everything proceeded according to protocols that had been refined through centuries of successful conquest. Admiral Zexkol was appointed to command the invasion fleet, a veteran officer who had overseen the subjugation of 6 different species during his long career. He reviewed the intelligence about human capabilities with professional interest, noting their primitive weapons and defensive systems. The Admiral saw nothing in the reports that suggested this campaign would be anything other than a routine conquest requiring minimal creativity or adaptation. The false data about human psychology and military doctrine convinced the Zephyrians that Earth's defenders would follow predictable patterns of resistance. The fabricated files suggested that humans valued individual survival over collective action, making them likely to surrender when faced with overwhelming odds. This assessment was exactly what the Zephyrian command structure expected to hear about a newly discovered primitive species. Meanwhile, the real intelligence was being delivered to human space by Jake Morrison and his companions. Their stolen shuttle had successfully navigated to Earth using the navigation data Lisa had memorized from the Zephyrian ship. They arrived with detailed information about alien technology, military capabilities, and most importantly, the psychological and strategic weaknesses that could be exploited in the coming war. Human military commanders received the intelligence with a mixture of horror and determination. The Zephyrian Empire was indeed vastly superior in terms of raw technological power, but the aliens had also revealed critical vulnerabilities that human creativity could exploit. Earth's leaders began developing defensive strategies based on the principle that their enemy's greatest strength was also their most dangerous weakness. General Peter Hayes, the Supreme Commander of Earth's Defense Forces, immediately recognized the opportunity that Jake Morrison's intelligence presented. The Zephyrians expected conventional resistance that could be calculated and overcome through superior firepower, but humanity would give them something completely unexpected. Earth would fight with guerrilla tactics, psychological warfare, and technological sabotage that the aliens had never encountered. Admiral Susan Clark began adapting human naval doctrine to exploit the information about Zephyrian command structures and tactical thinking. The aliens relied on centralized control and predictable strategies, making them vulnerable to decentralized human forces that could adapt quickly to changing circumstances. Earth's fleet would be organized and deployed in ways that would confuse and frustrate the invasion force. Colonel Gary Miller worked with civilian scientists to develop weapons and tactics based on the biological and psychological data that Ben Rodriguez had gathered. The Zephyrians' enhanced senses and genetic uniformity created opportunities for specialized attacks that would be devastating to them but harmless to humans. Earth's defenders would have advantages that the aliens could not imagine. The Zephyrian invasion fleet departed for human space with complete confidence in their eventual victory. Admiral Zexkol commanded 200 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy, crewed by experienced soldiers and supported by artificial intelligence, systems that had never failed in combat. The Admiral expected to complete the conquest of humanity within weeks of arriving in Earth's solar system. But the humans were preparing for a type of warfare that the Zephyrians had never experienced. Earth's defenders were not planning to meet. The invasion with conventional tactics or attempt to match alien technology with inferior human equipment. Instead, they would use their enemies' expectations against them, turning the aliens' own confidence and rigid thinking into weapons of their own destruction. High Counselor Vexmar received regular updates about the fleet's progress with satisfaction, already planning the administrative integration of human territories into the Empire. The elderly leader had overseen dozens of such conquests during his long life, and he expected this one to follow the same predictable pattern as all the others. The humans would resist briefly, realize the futility of opposing superior force, and eventually accept their place in the Zephyrian order. War Master Kexthor remained aboard his flagship, still unaware of the full extent of the sabotage that Jake Morrison had planted in his ship's systems. The corrupted data and hidden programs would not activate until the fleet reached human space, ensuring that the Zephyrians would discover their disadvantage only when it was too late to retreat or adapt their strategy. The stage was set for the greatest military disaster in Zephyrian history, orchestrated by the first humans they had encountered and dismissed as primitive specimens. The Empire's fatal decision to underestimate humanity was about to teach them that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one you never see coming. Admiral Zexkol entered the human solar system with the confidence of a commander who had never known defeat. His 200 warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons charged and shields raised according to standard Zephyrian invasion protocols. The alien fleet was a magnificent display of technological superiority, each vessel capable of destroying a planet and protected by defenses that had never been penetrated by enemy fire. But the humans were nowhere to be found. Instead of the desperate defense fleet that Zexkol expected to encounter, there was only empty space and scattered debris that seemed to indicate recent battle damage. The Admiral's tactical computers analyzed the situation and concluded that humanity's forces had already been destroyed by some unknown catastrophe, leaving Earth defenseless and ready for immediate occupation. Captain Steve Blake commanded the first human attack wave from a converted cargo vessel that looked like space junk to Zephyrian sensors. His fleet of 60 modified civilian ships hung motionless among the asteroid belt, their engines cold and their weapons powered down. The aliens passed within weapons range without detecting them, exactly as Jake Morrison had predicted, based on his knowledge of Zephyrian scanning technology and tactical assumptions. The attack began when Blake's forces simultaneously activated their engines and opened fire with weapons that should not have existed on primitive human vessels. The modified cargo ships unleashed salvos of kinetic projectiles and energy weapons that had been reverse-engineered from stolen Zephyrian technology, upgraded with human creativity and desperation. The aliens found themselves under attack from enemies they had not detected and weapons they did not recognize. Admiral Zexkol watched in shock as his formation was torn apart by attacks that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Human ships emerged from hiding places among the asteroids, attacked with devastating effectiveness, and then disappeared again before his forces could respond. The aliens' tactical computers could not track enemies that refused to follow predictable patterns or maintain formation structures. Commander Amy Peterson led ground-based defenses that exploited every weakness Ben Rodriguez had discovered about Zephyrian biology and psychology. Her forces used sonic weapons tuned to frequencies that caused disorientation in alien nervous systems, chemical agents that targeted their enhanced senses, and psychological warfare techniques that turned their rigid thinking patterns against them. The humans fought with methods that the Zephyrians could not understand or counter. The invasion fleet attempted to establish orbital positions around Earth, but they found themselves constantly harassed by human forces that appeared and disappeared, like ghosts. Captain Blake's ships used hit-and-run tactics that prevented the aliens from establishing any stable formations or defensive positions. Every time the Zephyrians tried to coordinate their response, the humans would strike from a new direction with weapons and strategies that defied all tactical logic. Lisa Carter commanded a cyber warfare division that penetrated Zephyrian computer systems using the access codes and vulnerability data she had gathered during their captivity. The alien AI networks, which had never been successfully attacked, found themselves facing intrusion techniques that exploited weaknesses they did not know existed. Human hackers corrupted navigation systems, disabled weapons targeting, and turned the aliens' own technology against them. The sabotage that Jake Morrison had planted months earlier began activating throughout the Zephyrian fleet, causing cascading system failures that the aliens could not explain or repair. Navigation computers provided false coordinates, weapon systems fired at friendly targets, and communication networks transmitted contradictory orders. The invasion force found itself crippled by technology that was supposed to guarantee their victory. Admiral Zexkol tried to implement standard siege tactics, surrounding Earth with his remaining vessels and bombarding the planet's surface. But the humans had prepared for this strategy by creating underground command centers and mobile defense platforms that could operate independently of any central authority. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting an enemy that had no single point of failure to attack. Colonel Gary Miller deployed biological weapons specifically designed to exploit Zephyrian genetic uniformity and enhanced physiology. The aliens' perfect coordination became a liability when engineered viruses spread through their ranks, causing debilitating illness that their immune systems could not handle. The same genetic optimization that the Zephyrians considered their greatest achievement made them vulnerable to attacks that would have minimal effect on genetically diverse humans. Human resistance forces used guerrilla tactics that completely baffled the Zephyrian command structure. Small groups of fighters would attack isolated alien positions, disappear into terrain that seemed impossible to defend, and then strike again from unexpected directions. The aliens' reliance on overwhelming force and technological superiority became useless against enemies who refused to present targets for conventional weapons. Ben Rodriguez coordinated scientific warfare that turned Zephyrian biology against them. Human researchers had developed weapons that exploited the aliens' enhanced senses, their extended lifespans, and their psychological dependence on order and predictability. The Zephyrians found themselves facing enemies who understood their weaknesses better than they understood them themselves. The invasion fleet began suffering catastrophic losses as human creativity overcame alien technology. Ships that had never been damaged in centuries of warfare were destroyed by weapons that seemed primitive but proved devastatingly effective. Admiral Zexkol watched his invincible armada disintegrate under attacks that his tactical training had never prepared him to face. War Master Kexthor, monitoring the battle from his flagship, finally understood the true magnitude of his error in underestimating the first humans he had encountered. Jake Morrison and his companions had not been lucky primitives who escaped through technical malfunction. They had been advanced scouts who gathered intelligence and prepared their species for exactly this type of warfare. The War Master realized that his casual dismissal of human capabilities had doomed his entire empire. Captain Steve Blake led the final assault against the remaining Zephyrian vessels, coordinating attacks from dozens of human ships that moved. With unpredictable creativity, the aliens tried desperately to retreat into hyperspace, but found their navigation systems corrupted and their escape routes blocked by human forces that seemed to anticipate their every move. The invasion fleet that had arrived with such confidence was destroyed or captured within hours. Admiral Zexkol's flagship was the last to fall, overwhelmed by human attackers who boarded through breaches created by weapons that combined alien technology with human ingenuity. The Admiral surrendered to Commander Peterson, acknowledging defeat to an enemy he still could not fully comprehend. The Zephyrian Empire had suffered its first major military disaster in over 1,000 years. News of the defeat spread throughout Zephyrian space, carried by the few vessels that managed to escape Earth's defenses. The empire that had seemed invincible for centuries had been humbled by a species they had dismissed as primitive and harmless. Other alien civilizations began questioning Zephyrian superiority and considering their own possibilities for independence. Jake Morrison stood in the command center that had coordinated humanity's impossible victory, reflecting on the chain of events that had begun with their capture months earlier. The Zephyrians had made their fatal mistake when they underestimated the first humans they encountered, treating them as specimens rather than recognizing them as harbingers of their own destruction. The war was far from over, but humanity had proven that technological superiority meant nothing against enemies who refused to fight by conventional rules. The Zephyrian Empire would never again assume that primitive meant harmless, but for them, this lesson had come too late. The first human they had met had indeed become their last mistake, setting in motion the events that would ultimately shatter their 1,000-year dominion over the galaxy. Earth's victory sent a message throughout known space that even the most powerful empires could fall when they faced enemies who specialized in turning strength into weakness and order into chaos. The age of Zephyrian supremacy was ending, brought down by the very species they had thought too primitive to pose any threat to their eternal rule.